So you'll put the filler primer, you'll put the primer and the filler primer over the surface, and it'll look nice and smooth with the filler primer. And like somebody said to me in the past, it's only once you got your top coat on, then you find your true imperfections. You find that the surface isn't as flat as you thought it was. You can get things called, it's a base coat or a clear coat. You can get sprays like that, which you go over the entire area, spray the whole lot on, and then I imagine you'd have to get something really, really big, as in a big piece of sandpaper, an entire piece of sandpaper, and a board the same size as that, and then go over the entire area, and you'll find your high spots and your low spots, and it'll help you to get a more smooth finish. But the trouble is with this panel, I mean, if it was a door panel like this, largely you're looking at a door panel and it's largely flat. As soon as you come to the rear quarter of a car, there are so many curves on that structure that I think you'd have to have a very, very good eye to get it perfectly flat. You've got a whole concave, a dipped concave along here. You've got a dipped concave all the way from this lip to the bottom. It's on a constant radius. It's not completely straight. It is on a constant radius, so it's going to be hard to get it completely flat. So just do it. Spend as much time as you can. If you're going to do any respraying work on a car, you need to leave yourself a week or two. I wouldn't try and do it in a few days, because you'll end up just doing half a job, and then you may be required to use the car again. You may require the car for use again. So leave yourself enough time, because you need it, especially if you're doing things for a first attempt. You'll want to go over things, and if you haven't got the time to do it, it's just going to be disappointing. Okay, so that's surface preparation, the filler. You've got all the imperfections filled. Then you can do a fine sand, wet and dry sandpaper over the entire lot. You can use, they recommend, like for final sanding, 1500 up to 2000 grit. Probably you can get lower grits of sandpaper. You can go up to 2500 grit. Do it wet. Sand the surface wet. Don't sand filler down wet, because apparently the water gets into the filler and causes pinholes and cracks and things like that. So don't sand filler wet, but only when you've got your final, when the surface is looking somewhere near. Ideally, when you've got the primer on top of it, you dry sand until you've got a lot of paint covering an area. There's no metal work. There's no filler exposed, and then you can start to do the wet sanding. You can wet sand the surface down, and then this is important. The area will look bone dry, but it isn't. The water creeps into the gaps, and the same with the area looks nice and clean, but there may be little bits of grease on there and things like that, and these cause paint defects. And I'll try and show you if I can on the car. It might not come up. It's probably going to be difficult to spot. Can you see it on the camera? I don't think you can. I think it's going to be... Oh, hang on. Can you see it there? That little bit. No, it's not coming. It's not showing very well. You might see it. See a tiny little speck. Look at just below that dark grey cloud. You see that little speck on the surface? Very, very. You see it moving up and down there now. You might see it on the video. Just right beneath the grey cloud, it's a little speck on the paint surface. That is an imperfection caused by the surface being either having solvents on it or being too wet, things like that. Surface contamination can cause blistering on the paintwork, the final coat of paintwork. So do your wet sanding, and then I would say leave it for hours. Leave it for, I don't know, half a day or something. Or some people even recommend leave it for 24 hours before you even think of doing your top coat. Do your top coat. If you're putting paint on, then and you're working in a garage and you haven't got any electricity, like I haven't got any electricity, it can be tempting to see what you're doing, to get one of these, get a lead lamp and go right up close to the vehicle, and then you're spraying the paint on, and if you've got one of these generates so much heat, you can put your hand a meter away from the damn thing, and you can still feel the heat from it. that causes heat, is one of the causes of something called dry spray. You'll spray paint onto a surface and you're expecting it to come out of a can, it's expecting it to be smooth, you're expecting it to be nice and smooth. It comes out, it looks like a sand or gravel. It's really rough to texture, and if you get that, then there's a core. It's not that the spray can's faulty. If you keep going over it repeatedly with the spray can, it's never going to get any better. You have to remedy the fault. It's not with, unless it's a really dodgy spray can, which I haven't had one yet. It can be things like too much heat. So if you've got a really strong spotlight on a panel, the heat coming off that will cause paint defects. So you need to move the heat source away from the paint. If you can, hang it up on roof rafters, for example. If you've got a transformer, put the transformer up on top of a gas canister. Have the extension leads through your garage. You do want to be you do really want to be spraying in quite a dry space as well. If you spray in a damp area, you're also going to get condensation onto the bodywork, and then also you'll get condensation mixing with the fresh paint, and you'll get a paint defect then, which is called matting or clouding. You put shiny top coat on, you put nice black, silver, red, whatever colour, blue, metallic or non-metallic paint, the finished paint on, you look at it and it goes cloudy within a matter of 10 minutes or so. Just check the video time. Yeah, I've still got 22 minutes and I haven't run out of time yet. It's not giving me any warnings. So yeah, you'll see the video go, you'll see the surface go cloudy, and as you've sprayed it, and that's caused by condensation. So you want to be doing it in a dry surface on a dry surface if you can. I would say middle of the day is probably best. In the morning there's a lot of damp around, and also in the evening there's a lot of damp around. If it's rain, there's going to be damp around. If you try and spray outside, the damp will get sucked up from the grass, from the concrete, gravel, etc., and it may drift. You may not see it, but there may be a haze which covers a panel. I've had inexplicable defects, but I've done it when I've sprayed in the damp, so I probably pinpoint it to that more than anything else. And it seemed to improve during the dry weather, so it must be to do with the condensation, background condensation in the area. So yes, try and pick a dry day. If you haven't got a garage, then in the past I made a structure over the car. You can get a gazebo, for example, put it over the entire car, or you can make a wooden structure, attach it to, if you've got a garden shed, for example. Say you've got a garden shed on the side of the garage. You've got a garden shed, then say that's the garden shed. You can make wooden structures coming out off the top of it, which cover and then just basically join everything to cover the car, and then use a tarpaulin. I've got a tarpaulin in the garage. You see I've got it nailed up there to stop the overspray covering any valuable things at the back of the garage. When it comes to masking up the car, you can actually take this tarpaulin to the vast majority of the car, and then you've saved yourself time in masking up the car. As far as masking up the car goes, I found cling film works best. I don't know whether there's any problems with the static, if it causes static defects, and it could cause paintwork defects. I've yet to learn that. But yeah, cling film I found is the quickest way to do it. You can buy, it's really long, really quite wide. You can use newspaper. You can mask off edges with masking tape. You can buy curved masking tape. See, I'm trying to throw so many hints at you here. You can use curved masking tape all the way along. If you use normal masking tape, it'll buckle and crease. So going back to spraying the entire panel, you've sanded down the area which with the paint defects, the accent damage defects. Sand down in all the rest of the paintwork. Sand it down with a wet and dry sandpaper. Have it wet with water. Fine grit, 1500, 2000 grit, for example. Go over the entire panel. Go over the entire existing paintwork all the way across the panel. Do that. I would say mask the edges up first of all, because you don't want to be accidentally going from the panel you're going to spray onto another panel and then having a scratch that you've got to polish out. So mask everything off first, and then be careful when you're sanding on the edges of the panel that you're intending to spray. So yeah, you mask your edges up, sand it away, and then you've got the surface ready for respraying. When it comes to areas such as, now this panel here, if I open the door, I hope my dog doesn't come running out now. There's Oscar in there. He's gone mad inside the house, so let him in here. Stay there, stay back, good boy. Right, I'll try and wipe some of this rubbing compound away. In fact, I'll show you this area instead. You can see, looking at it, that the paintwork comes down the outside of the car and it goes to the inside of the car. Now, what I would do is, for example, what I noticed when I did a respray in the past on this car, is you just use a line, you just use a fine line. So for example, mask up the edge of the door with masking tape, shut the door up, and then just spray up until the edge of the masking tape. And then you'll have a fine line afterwards. But to be honest with you, I didn't notice lines from the previous respray. You can use rubbing compound, you can buy rubbing compound to go over the edges of the line and just lightly go over the edge of the line, and then you will see it flatten in places. I'm trying to show you it here. You will notice it. You'll end up with a faint line. You'll end up with very, very faint. You can see it there, the colour difference between there and there, the middle of it and the outside of it. It's probably showing up a lot more in the light, but you'll end up with a very, very faint respray line. But it's better having it on a an angle than it is in the middle of a panel. So if on an angle, you're not going to see it so much. So that's one tip there, which I recommend. That's what I recommend doing. So yeah, mask it off, spray the entire panel, and then if you get, you might develop paint defects on the entire panel. On the final respray, you might develop paint defects. If you get surface contamination, water, grease, etc. on the surface, and you get the paint bubbles up, then I think it's just a case of sanding it off, or just put up with them. I've got a few on mine, can't do anything about it now, too late. I'm not prepared to spend any more paint on the job, throw any more of that into it, so I'll just have to leave it. It's one or two tiny little blisters in places. Not the end of the world if you get a few of those, I suppose. Looking at the panel in general, it looks nice and shiny, and that's with a spray can. If you make it out here, I had runs on the surface. See that little patch there? Very different coloured patch, slight colour difference there. If you get runs on the surface, as tempting as it is, don't try and wipe them off before the paint's dry. Just leave them, because what you'll end up with is a run on the surface, and then underneath if you remove paint, you might remove too much paint. You might have like for example, I had runs in the lacquer, a clear coat over the entire over the black coat. Tried rubbing those out, and I think I touched some of the metallic paint underneath, because I noticed there's little dimples. If you get runs, just leave them as they are. Don't try and mess with them. 2 weeks later, once the paint's hardened up, you can then, as I've done here, you can then flatten them with a piece of sand. You can get wet sandpaper on there, and it looks like you're wrecking your car. But you get a 1500 grit or something like that, and just go over the run, have it soaking wet all the time, go over the run, over the entire area in which the run's contained, and then wipe everything off, clean it down with water, dry it off with something like a chamois leather or something, and then you'll then see a scratch surface, and you can see if there's any highs or lows within that scratch surface. You can then carry on. If it's impossible to see whether it's perfectly flat or not, then just get some paint renovator and get an orbital polisher, which is basically a polishing machine for the car body. Use that with the paint renovator and go over the area repeatedly, and you will end up with a shiny surface like this again. Nice shiny surface. It looks like your car's it looks like your paint job is absolutely ruined, but you can make it nice and flat and shiny again just by using a paint renovator compound. Then you can polish it afterwards and make the surface even more shiny. So yeah, you can do that if you get paint defects. Try to think of some more tips I can give you.